Hey guys, welcome back here to today's edition of the Fishing Teacher, and appreciate you guys swinging by the channel today. And guys, at the time of filming this video, we're in the middle of April and we are getting ready to get in the prime time for the swim jig season. Swim jig season is starting up about right now. Probably is already going if you're down in the southern part of the country, but I like a swim jig a lot in May. Say when that water temperature starts to hit 70 degrees, they really bite it good. So I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of a primer on fishing swim jigs today, sort of like, how I like to fish them, the type of areas they work in. Because man, guys, it's one of the funnest ways to catch bass. I mean, if you've never caught bass on a swim jig, based upon how you're fishing that swim jig, it can be some of the most exciting fishing you're ever gonna have. Catches quality fish also, so we're gonna get into that today's episode here. And also guys, the swim jig we're talking about is I'm gonna show you the Megabass uozo swimmer. This is my favorite swim jig to use. It's got a little spinner on the tail here for added attractum. It's got a nano-coated, super sharp hook with a great keeper on it. It's got the fish head design, a nice thin weed guard, absolutely the finest swim jig there is. So I'll put this uozo swimmer swim jig in my Tackle Warehouse link in the description of this video if you guys would like to order a few. They got a bunch of good colors. We'll talk about colors here in the video, so really appreciate that. And also guys, one final thing. Anybody interested in booking a private on the water lesson with me, all you have to do is go to my Facebook page, Intuitive Angling with Randy Blockett, and shoot me a message. I do my private lessons, anything you want to learn about here on Stockton Lake or Table Rock Lake in Missouri. So look forward to hearing from you guys on that. Appreciate it. Okay guys, swim jigs, we talk about them on and off on all three of my channels because they're one of the most underrated lure categories out there. A swim jig is a deadly bait for catching, bass in shallow water, especially in the months of April, May, and June. That's primarily when I use a swim jig. To be honest with you guys, I don't use a swim jig much except for April, May, June, but it is always tight on one of my rods in April, May, or June, especially once that water starts getting close to 70. Now, the difference between a swim jig and a regular jig, a lot of it is the head design. Now you can use a regular jig as a swim jig. It works okay, but a specifically designed swim jig like that uozo swimmer, the head allows that bait to keep running straight all the time. And also on a swim jig, a little bit different. You usually have a little bit lighter wire hook. So a little bit more finessey, designed to be swum through the water column. I mean, that's what a swim jig is. It's like you're swimming it through the water column. You're not fishing a swim jig on the bottom. You're keeping it up in the water column here. Same as like if you fish a spinner bait. There's very similar as far as how you fish a spinner bait, and a swim jig is very similar in the retrieve. The only difference is you usually fish a swim jig higher, closer to the surface. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about how you want to work a swim jig, and then I'm going to talk about specifically the type of areas that you want to fish. Now, most of the time on my swim jig, I use a flipping stick. And the reason I use my flipping stick is I can make a more accurate presentation pitching and flipping that swim jig around tight cover. A lot of times I'm not casting a swim jig. Sometimes I do, but more than not, I'm pitching and flipping that swim jig like down the edge of a dock, along the edge of some type of a grass bed or cover or log or lay down tree in the water. I like to fish a swim jig around some type of an object where that fish can ambush that swim jig just like they would a spinnerbait or something. Now occasionally I'll just go down the bank and cast it, but I prefer just casting it next to an object. You're gonna get a lot more bites like that. And a flipping stick is a really good tool for that because you can accurately make your presentation, and also you get a good hook set. But the main thing about using a long rod with a swim jig is that you can keep the bait higher and fish it slower. Here's how I fish a swim jig. It's like I'll pitch it out there like that. Say I'm pitching it next to a dock or tree. I keep my rod tip high, about the 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock position, and I'm shaking it like that when I reel it. You don't just reel a swim jig in. Yeah, I mean, you can catch them doing that, but I don't do it. I shake it while I'm reeling it. So that swim jig is just sort of coming through that water, sort of undulating like that as you shake it and reel it. And that's how I get a lot of bites with it. Now, occasionally I'll shake it and reel it. If it goes past a piece of cover, I may kill it for 6 inches and bring it back up to the surface, but I want to keep it high in the water column. Most of the time, I like to fish my swim jig in sight or just barely out of sight. So it works in stained water. It is a stained water technique. You're not going to do very good on a swim jig if you got water visibility over about 2 foot. It is a bait for that visibility of about 8 inches to 1.5 feet is going to be your best window for it. So given that, I like to keep my bait in sight some of the time or all of the time if it's really shallow. Now, what I'll do is, I'll make that pitch out there, I'll reel it like that, and I want to see that bait, times I can drop it down maybe 2 or 3 inches and lose sight of it, but then I'm going to bring it back up, and I'm going to try to keep it close to the surface, because a bass will hit a swim jig better the higher you have it in the water column. The only exception to that is if you're fishing a swim jig through some type of aquatic vegetation. Let's say, for example, you got some submerged hydrilla or milfoil or something like that. In a situation like that, I'll drop it down and I'll try to reel that swim jig over the top of that grass, maybe 2 or 3 feet under the water. That doesn't happen very often. 9 times out of 10, the way that I'm fishing a swim jig, doesn't matter where I'm at, is I'm throwing it next to a piece of cover like that, and I'm keeping it about that far underneath the water, and that's how I catch a lot of fish on it. Now, one of the things that you're going to have to really discipline yourself is when you get a bite on a swim jig, because a bite on a swim jig it creates a reaction in yourself that you'll just want to jerk as quick as you can. Because say, for example, you haven't had a bite for a while, pitch that swim jig out there, you're reeling it, one boils all over it, you just want to set that hook as soon as you see that boil. Because on a swim jig, most of the time, you're going to see that fish hit it. You're either going to actually see the bass come up and grab it, or you're going to see it boil under your bait because it's so far, it's not very far under the surface. When you're working that bait, it's almost like with a chatterbait. Anticipate that strike, and you're working it, all of a sudden you see one boil on it like that. Just hesitate a little bit, give the fish some slack, let the fish swim with the bait until the line's straightened out, and then just pull into it and start reeling. Giving the fish that extra second or two before you set the hook is key on a swim jig, because a lot of times they'll come up and bite the trailer on it and not get the hook. So really try to discipline yourself to do that. But guys, it works deadly in shallow water. Now let me sort of go to you guys, some of the type of water that I like to fish it in. Usually when I'm fishing a swim jig, I'm fishing it in the same type of areas that the bass spawn. Because let's say, for example, you got, a good spawning cove where you've seen a lot of fish spawning in April or something. Swim jig's not a very good bait when the fish are actually bedding. It's usually right after they get done bedding. What happens is there's going to be a population of fish that once they get done bedding, they're going to hang out in that same cove or that same bay. They're not just going to swim out of there. Some of them are hanging around in there, they're garden fried. Some of them are hanging around in there because you got cover, or you got some bait fish, or you got some food, or they're recuperating. But what happens is, I think about half the population of bass in a lake, when they're done spawning, they swim out into the middle of the lake and they go out deep and they suspend and whatever. But the other half, they live in that same type of water, and they will hang out in there all the way to like early or mid-June. They're just up there feeding. I mean, there's a lot of activity. There's shad in there. There's crawdads moving. You're getting frogs in the water. You're getting activity up on the bank. There's a lot of food shallow during the springtime of the year, and the bass will hang in there and just sort of feed up and whatever. This is why, I stay in those type of areas. So my number one swim jig area is the same type of places that a bass have been spawning in. And how I fish that, or how I approach that, it just has to do whatever the cover available is. I mean, if you're down south, like in some of the TVA lakes, or even south further, some of the Coosa River fisheries, you may have some shallow grass like water willows and stuff to fish, which are good. If you're in my part of the country, I mean, it could be just shade lines, it could be docks, it could be wood in the water, anything like that. Bass love shade with a swim jig. Bass will hold in shade with no cover, and it's a really good place to fish a swim jig too. So let's say, for example, you're back in the cove, you got an overhanging tree in the water that's creating some shade, maybe about as big around as the front deck of your boat. Toss that swim jig up in that shade. That's a good place for it with that. So I stay shallow with that swim jig all the time, fishing most of the time less than 3 or 4 foot of water. In fact, all the time less than 3 or 4 foot of water. I'm casting it right to that bank. Colors on a swim jig are also pretty critical. There's really 3 different colors I use. I use some type of a shad pattern. You don't have to get all detailed on the exact color. Some type of a pearl or white swim jig. This is really good if the water is dirty or if the shad are spawning like in May. It can be really good. The other one I use is some type of a green pumpkin. Usually some green pumpkin, maybe with a little chartreuse on it, a little orange. That's going to be when those fish are feeding on perch, and this is going to be really good like later in May and June is when they feed on perch. So I got a green pumpkin, I got some type of a shad pattern, and then some situations I use a black one. Black and blue swim jig is really good, especially in any lake in Florida. Florida lakes, tannic water, tidal rivers, places that have shallow vegetation are really good for a black swim jig, or really dirty water. Say, for example, you got water visibility of 4 to 6 inches, about like that. A black swim jig can be pretty good under those conditions too. And again, most of the time, depending upon the size of swim jig I'm using, I'm gonna use anywhere between 15 to 20 pound test fluorocarbon for my line on there. So anyway, guys, I think that's gonna help you out. Just follow some of those tips. And again, I'll put that uozo swim jig in my tackle warehouse link in this video description. Guys, that is the best swim jig. I mean, I'm not saying that because I'm with Megabass. You get you one of those jigs and prove me wrong on it. It is just, the components on that thing are second to none. Definitely catches them. So hope you guys are well. See you.